Reading 83 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Animal House, June 21st, 1947. Commentary on Psycho-Transformism. We return once more to the idea of psychological transformation. We must understand that the main ideas of this work come round in a rotation. They cannot be spoken of altogether, so a rotation is necessary. This work has been tentatively called Psycho-Transformism. Today we speak again about Psycho-Transformism, in order to understand more what is meant by the term. A man, a woman, by means of self-remembering, can transform their lives. They cannot transform life itself, but their own lives, their relationship to life. You cannot change life itself. The recurring circle of events that constitute life and history, but you can change your relation to them by changing your attitude to them. This is one aspect of psychological transformation, or psychotransformism. But to effect it, you must change your attitude to yourself. You cannot, by having the same ideas about yourself, change yourself. And if you cannot change yourself, you cannot change the effect of life upon you. One has heard this said repeatedly, but one does not perhaps yet see what it means. It means if you remain the same, life for you will be the same, and then the question of psychological transformation does not arise. That is, it is not for you. So I suggest you do not bother about it. However, the whole work is about self-change. If you think this is an extraordinary idea, then I will add, do not bother about the work. Now, the work begins with you yourself. It starts with the observation of yourself. That is, with drawing slowly into consciousness of yourself all sorts of things that belong to your being, of which you are unaware. This alters your idea of yourself. A man must know himself. That is, he must become more and more conscious of himself. So conscious, in fact, that, for example, when he is talking, he is conscious of which I is speaking, and can notice what it is saying, and not identify with it. This is inner separation. This is especially difficult in this case, because when we are in action, we are usually most asleep. That is, least conscious. And one of our commonest actions is talking. If you do not believe it, watch another person using one of his typical gramophone records, such as his adventures or successes, before a new audience. Talking is the most mechanical action, but one can be conscious of this most mechanical action. One can observe it while it is going on. Then one is conscious of what is mechanically going on. This seems paradoxical, but try it and see for yourself. It needs a very light touch. The first object is to observe oneself without criticism. We are told to observe, not stop. So one can observe one is talking mechanically. And, as I said, notice which I is speaking, without checking it. If you begin to criticize it, it will stop, and so you will learn nothing further. In this commentary, I will call this the first necessary stage in psychotransformism. This developed power of being conscious of one's mechanicalness and not stopping it. If you keep on trying to stop things, you cannot see them. Our aim at first is not to stop, but to see, to become conscious of. Now, in this connection, as you know, The work teaches that the realization of one's mechanicalness is one of the first experiences of self-remembering. It is easy to see why. Hitherto, you have taken yourself seriously. You have identified with everything in yourself, with family, money, position, etc. You have said I to everything. Then there is a brief vibration of greater consciousness, and you suddenly see that all you took so seriously as yourself is machinery and not you. You then realize your mechanicalness. Now this introduces us to the idea of Psycho-Transformism. Self-change is not possible if one can be only what one is. I mean that were what we are all that we could possibly be, no transformation would be possible. But the work says we are only at the beginning of ourselves and calls us seeds. Take our consciousness. The work says we are not conscious and that Western psychology makes a fundamental error in taking man as a conscious being. There is a ladder of consciousness. We seek the next rungs, called the state of self-remembering, self-consciousness, or self-awareness. As we ascend this ladder, everything changes. It is a magic lift. Imagine a seed in this lift. If it ascends, it becomes a tree. If it descends, it becomes a seed again. This is clearly not a three-dimensional lift. In three-dimensional space, one goes up and down and remains the same, save perhaps for being worse-tempered than ever. When we know this magic lift, which is in everyone, we know that going up in it requires the greatest care and valuation, and that everything false in us can make us fall straight down instantly. I will put it more simply. You cannot rightly go up to a higher level of being if you go up climbing to all the false notions and values that belong to a lower level. For example, if you cannot stop wanting what you think you want, you certainly cannot go up with intelligent experience in this magic lift. And so you render yourself liable to be suddenly hurled down. This means no real valuations, save those of false personality. All this belongs to the work teaching about magnetic center and sense of scale. Of course, if everything is the same to you, as when you only want to be a popular success, whether in life or in the work, then you have no sense of real inner valuation, and so no sense of scale. Then it is as if your inner lift is not present, and instead there are precipices, height and depth without means. Now the lift is means between height and depth, and at every floor it stops, and we should realize new feelings and insights. And so we can be taught. But some cannot even be taught simply because they live in the conviction that they are right and know all to be known. Just imagine the state of a man who in this way cannot see that his minute knowledge compared with his ignorance is incommensurable. Yet people live in this illusion, that is, under a definite hypnotism among the many forms of hypnotism that act on humanity to keep them asleep. Now the realization of one's mechanicalness and the realization of one's ignorance, for all knowledge leads into mystery. These two realizations are necessary for any transformation of oneself to take place. Why? Because they weaken the hold of the acquired personality. Unless the grip of the personality is weakened, no psychotransformism is possible. In other words, the background of one's mind must change, and a new, deeper thinking begin. This changes the attitude to life and the attitude to oneself. Attitudes begin in mental center. Change the mind, and attitudes change. And to change the mind, the habitual, little, meager ways of thinking must change. This work is to make us think in a new way. Why? Because only in this way can we change attitudes. Mr. Ouspensky said, "If attitudes do not change, nothing can change in oneself." Now let us come, as it were, from background, more into foreground. How, by practical work, can a man begin to transform himself? I said just now that if you cannot stop wanting what you think you want, you cannot really change. I will give a simpler example. An obstinate man has a picture of himself as being a very reasonable man. After, say, a considerable time, several years at least, he begins to suspect his picture. That is, what he was not conscious of before begins to enter his consciousness. He begins to be conscious of the self-fact that he really is obstinate, and finally sees it is so. What is the result? By this increase of consciousness, his being changes. That is, a small transformation of being takes place. It may not be merely small. It may mean that many other things in his being can readjust themselves, especially if unrecognized and so unacknowledged obstinacy has anything to do with his chief feature. If so, the whole man will begin to change, that is, undergo a transformation. Now another example from a different angle. You take a thing, an event, always in the same way. You always react mechanically to it. You have no idea that although you cannot change the event in life, you can alter the way you react to it. I can only say, as I have said often before, if you can see it, this means by experience, you have something of great value in your hands. However, people are so glued down to the familiar that they almost resent the idea of taking things differently. There is always this hurt feeling in the work. In the Gospels, it is called being offended. Most people who met Christ were very offended. Now, if you could start the day from the sense of the utter mystery of your life, you would begin to understand something about Psycho-Transformism. But you pick up your today self from your yesterday self, and so carry on everything as before. You think that the familiar is right, and so remain the same. You do not understand what was meant when it was said that those born of the Spirit are unpredictable. Now, if you worship the same, you transform nothing. You turn even what might be new into the old. In that case, certainly you do not remember yourself, and you remain a machine. You remember only the wrong self, what is not you. So you carry all the negative states of yesterday into today, untransformed.